up, guys? Welcome back, or welcome to Running for Views. Today we're going to be talking about Zach Miller's best races. But before we get into that, did you know that 86% of you aren't subscribed? Hit that subscribe button, or in your next race, you're gonna have to go out like Zach Miller. You think you could charge off the front like Zach? Subscribe already! Just kidding, please subscribe, thank you. If you don't know who Zach Miller is, you don't know what ultra running is. He's been racing since 2013 when he was 24 years old and has been racing competitively ever since. Alright, so a little bit about Zach before we get into his races. He was born in Kenya, so I guess that makes a little bit of sense about how he got as fast as he is. But yeah, both of his parents were Christian missionaries there, and then they moved to Pennsylvania after he was born. He ran track and cross country and played soccer when he was in high school. After high school, he continued running at the Rochester Institute of Technology, where he was studying engineering. After college, he worked at a print shop on a cruise ship and trained for races on the boat's treadmills, stairwells, and whenever they would go into port, he would go running as well. So after he was done on cruise ships, he started working at Bar Camp, which is on Pikes Peak, which is a 14,000 foot mountain in Colorado, and he worked there for 5 years. Then after Bar Camp, his primary residence was a converted school bus. So he lived inside of a school bus and still does. From 2019 to 2022, he had a really bad problem in his Achilles that made it so he had to take 3 years off. So in 2022, he returned to racing, and he's been racing ever since, and that leads us up to today. So like I said, he lives in a bus and has been traveling around the US, but mostly bases himself in Colorado. Also, Zach has a very specific way of racing. Almost every race, he immediately just charges to the front and stays in the front the entire race because he's winning a lot of the races that he's doing. So in my opinion, he's kind of like the pit bull of ultra running, not the artist, the dog. He's just like a big ball of muscle that just charges to the front of every race that he does and is not scared of anyone. All right, so now that you guys know a little bit about Zach Miller, let's get into his top 10 best races of all time. Number 10, JFK 50. So this is the first major race that he won and is where his career really started in ultra running. The JFK 50 is one of the oldest ultras in America and has been going since 1963. In 2013, he won the race and got the third fastest time in the race's history. So when he won the race, he beat professional ultra athletes Matthew Flaherty and Michael Wardian. He won the race in a time of 5 hours and 38 minutes and averaged a 6:45 minute per mile pace. And keep in mind that he won this race while only training on a cruise ship. He won one of the most competitive 50-mile races in the world while training on a cruise ship. That's very impressive. Number 9, Lake Sonoma 50 mile. This was the next race that he did after the JFK 50 miler and really solidified him as the new face of ultra running. So this was his first competitive ultra marathon. I would say that the JFK 50 is more of like a road race. It's kind of just on flat bike paths. It's a really quick course. But this race is on single track in the mountains of California. So in true Zach fashion, he won the race just going hard out of the front and holding that all the way until the end. He led from wire to wire, start to finish. That is the Zach Miller way. So he won this race beating athletes like Rob Krar, Sage Canaday, and Max King, all while only training on a cruise ship. He was still training on the cruise ship, and he won this race from cruise ship training. That is so incredibly impressive. He won this race in 6 hours and 11 minutes, averaging a 7:25 mile pace. Number 8, Madeira Island Ultra Trail. Madeira Island Ultra Trail is a proving ground for ultra athletes who want to start getting recognized as the professional athlete that they are. The race crosses the entire island of Madeira, which is a small island far off the coast of Europe. Zach won this race in 2016, and I think that this really put his name on the map internationally. He won this 115-kilometer race in a time of 13 hours and 52 minutes. And he was the first American winner of the race in the race's 3-year history. He also got the course record in this race, but European races are changing every year. They're never on the same course, so it's hard to compare year after year the times that are being set. Number 7. Lavaredo Ultra Trail 50K. So this was kind of a smaller race that he did. Now, don't get me wrong, Lavaredo is a very big competitive ultra marathon, but it wasn't the full distance of the race that he ran. He chose to do the shorter distance of just 50 kilometers because the event was sponsored by North Face, which is his sponsor. He won the race by 7 minutes, which is actually a really good result if you're talking about just a 50K race. I wish that he had done the full course just so we could see how his times compare to the people who were running the race that year, but like I said, he chose to do the shorter version of the race. He won in a time of 4 hours and 20 minutes, which comes out to about an 8:22 minute per mile pace. Number 6, Andorra 100K. So when he won this race in 2022, it was only the second edition of the Andorra 100K race. And the only reason he really did it was to get back into UTMB for 2022. So this was his first race back after not racing at all for 3 years, and he crushed it. He charged from the front and won the race in a time of 14 hours and 20 minutes, beating second place by 15 minutes and securing his spot in the 2022 UTMB. Number 5, Tarawera 100 mile. Tarawera is another race that he did just so he could get into UTMB, only this time it was for 2023. Tarawera takes place in New Zealand and has been a race that's been happening for a while now. The race has about 18,000 feet of climbing, which is really similar to the elevation of Western States 100. Speaking of Western States, why has Zach never raced Western States? He won Tarawera in a time of 14 hours and 41 minutes, which would have won him Western States probably 9 times out of 10. But yeah, he averaged 8 minutes and 48 seconds per mile this race, which is insane to think about, averaging just under 9 minutes for 100 miles, over 18,000 feet of vert. That's crazy. Number 4, UTMB. Zach has come in top 10 every time he's raced UTMB. In 2016, he was 6th. In 2017, he was 9th. In 2022, he was 5th. And in 2023, we'll get into that a little later. UTMB is the most competitive ultramarathon on the planet. It is literally the Super Bowl of ultra running. And for all of our European listeners, it is the World Cup of ultra running. Placing top 10 at UTMB is something that most professional ultra athletes can only dream about doing. And he's done it 4 times. He has yet to win the race, but man, has he gotten close. I can guarantee that in the next few years, he will put together that winning performance at UTMB. Number 3, North Face Endurance Challenge. So the North Face Endurance Challenge used to be one of the most competitive ultras in the world. But once it moved locations, it stopped being as competitive. But yeah, he won this race 3 times in a row, basically beating every single professional ultra runner that's ever existed, because everyone was doing this race back then. So 2012 is the year that all of the course records for this race come from, but when he won the race in 2016, I would say personally, this is definitely the course record. There was almost 3,000 more feet of elevation this year, and it was just an incredible performance that he put on. He did it in a time of 5 hours and 56 minutes, averaging a pace of 7:07 per mile, on a course that had 6,300 feet of vert. Insane. Number 2, CCC. CCC is part of the UTMB week in Chamonix, France, and is the most competitive 100K race in the world. And Zach Miller was the first American to ever win CCC. So from 2006 to 2015, no American had ever won the race, man or woman. Which is saying a lot because a lot of American women had been performing very well at UTMB. So they changed this race too often to keep track of times, but when he did this race, it was 101 kilometers long with 20,000 feet of elevation. And he did it in a time of 11 hours and 53 minutes, averaging an 11:18 minute mile pace. This was also his first UTMB race that he did, so it's super impressive that he was able to put together a win at such a competitive race that he had never set foot on before. Number 1, UTMB. You guys know that I had to put this performance as his number 1 race. Even though he came in second, it was his best race of all time, in my opinion. So at the start of the race, he actually stuck with the front group instead of just going off on his own and leading the race from the beginning, which I think helped him a lot. However, at kilometer 99, he finally had enough and took control of the race and started to lead. He led the race for another 45 kilometers until he was caught by Jim Walmsley. But he held on for the last 30K and was able to come in second to Jim Walmsley. And while doing this, he broke the 20-hour mark at UTMB, which is one of the most impressive things you can do in ultra running. The only other people that have done it are Kilian Jornet, Matthew Blanchard, Jim Walmsley, and Zach Miller. That's it. So yeah, if you're up there with those other 3 athletes, you are one of the best athletes to ever exist, period. But man, I just wish that he would have waited just a little longer to kick, because who knows what would have happened, but I think he could have won the race. But yeah, the last mile of this 108-mile race, he found out that he was so close to breaking 20 hours, he literally sprinted it in the last mile, which is insane. At the end of a 100-mile race, to be sprinting it in, that's the most Zach Miller thing ever. Just such an incredible performance, and I cannot wait for Zach to win this race one day. But yeah, guys, that wraps things up for today. What did you guys think? Leave it in the comments below if I missed any of his good races, or what order you would have put these races in. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe, and if you liked the video, smash that like button, because 1 like equals 1 more race Zach Miller will win. Okay, bye.